that stands in stark contrast to the community outside these walls, right? I mean, this is a community really with the values of sustainability, of freedom, of kindness, compassion, health, awareness, to do whatever we can to increase that, to be examples for that, to embody that. And it does radiate beyond these walls. We will all leave these walls, we'll go out and be part of the larger community, but to really see the power of that, and I have to say, in my own life, as a little kid growing up, I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, and I was eating the usual meals, lots of meat, dairy, and eggs. I remember when I was about 7 years old, I had never questioned any of it. And finally, I started to question it. I said to my mother, "Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats?" I thought maybe somebody eats something else, And she said, "Yes, everybody eats this." So my hopes were dashed. Oh, that's what everybody eats. Okay, I guess. And then she came back, though, she said something. She said a word I had never heard in my life. She said, "Well, actually, there are vegetarians." I'm like, what are vegetarians? And she said, "Don't worry, you'll never meet one." She said, "I've never met one. I'm a lot older than you are. And, I don't know where they get their protein. So I don't know. I guess they're hypothetical people. They don't actually exist. They're just... They're people that don't eat protein somehow. And so the sad truth is that my mother was totally right. I never heard the word again, and that was the end of it. And I remember going away to the summer camp in Vermont where it was affiliated with this beautiful organic dairy, it's this wonderful little farm where nothing bad could ever happen to anyone. But I remember being taught how to catch a chicken, how to put her down on this board, had my axe, cut her head off, put her through the scalding tank. We ate chickens, we gathered around a dairy cow. She wasn't giving enough milk anymore. And you got to understand, on any dairy, organic or not, even though dairy cows would live to be 30 years old at least, on any dairy, and when they reach 5 years old, they are killed because their production drops off because they've been kept pregnant and lactating simultaneously. You can imagine if you're a woman what that's like. You're raped on a rape rack. After 9 months, you give birth to your baby, and then you want to love the baby, but you can't. The baby's immediately stolen. On any dairy, organic or not, that's what happens. And then you're impregnated again immediately. So now you're lactating and pregnant. And so when you're only 4 or 5 years old, you're worn out. Plus they push them to give, instead of 10 pounds of milk a day, about 100 pounds of milk a day. And so we gathered around this dairy cow with a gun and just, that's what dairies do. They kill animals. They kill, 4 out of 5 babies will be killed, and the mother will be killed. Will be killed immediately, and the mother will be killed after 5 years. So I saw all that. I actually participated in the whole cutting and killing and everything of these animals, but I just was so deeply indoctrinated, I couldn't question it. I knew I'd gone through, at that point, 13 years of the most intense indoctrination a human being can go through. I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God gave us these animals, and they don't have a soul, and they taste good, and if you don't eat them, you'll definitely die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency, and so that was it. And I was a product of my culture, but again, the point is, I was able, a few years later, to discover a different community. So after I graduated from college in 1975, I left home, I traveled, I tried to get to California, I got as far as Buffalo with my brother walking, we headed south. We ended up finally in Tennessee at the farm, and the farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world, and there was about 900 people living there, and they were all vegetarian. They were all vegans, actually. No one heard of the word vegan, so they said, we're vegetarians. But they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs, and none of them were dying from protein deficiency. They were all thriving. They had probably 200 children vegan from birth, and they were thriving. They were doing great. And I asked the guy, why are you guys vegetarians? And he said, well, because of 2 things. One, you know that most of the grain we're growing in the world, we're feeding to animals while people are starving. And we want to try to end world hunger, and so we're vegetarians. We're eating lower on the food chain. And the other reason is that you know what the animals go through, and he explained to me the mutilation and killing and castration and all this horror that these poor animals go through. And so it's kind of like Toto. Remember in the Wizard of Oz when Toto kind of pulled the curtain back, and you suddenly see what's really going on? I suddenly saw a little glimpse of what's really going on behind the curtain of our society, and the massive sexual violence and other violence towards animals. And so that was it. I had this example. I learned the truth, essentially, about what we do to animals, and I had this example of a community where people, and we ate together, like we did here, meals that were delicious of grains and vegetables. I mean, they weren't as delicious then as they are now, I have to say. I remember they had the very first soy dairy there, and so we would like cook these soybeans and mash them and then kick the milk. Then they invented the very first soy ice cream. It was the first vegan ice cream. It was called Ice Bean. It was terrible, but it was like, well, it was we thought, oh, it's pretty good, not too bad. It was like we were just like glad to get anything. But nowadays it's so great to see the enormous high quality and deliciousness of vegan foods that are really you can't even tell the difference hardly. But the basic idea is that to see that it's really community that makes that kind of change possible. And when I saw an example of this, then that helped me change. I don't think I ever would have changed. I'd probably still be eating meat and dairy if it wasn't for these people showing me an alternative. That's why it's so important for us to show that there's an alternative and that we're thriving. And we are thriving, I mean, that's the beauty of it. And then later, in 1984, I shaved my head and went up in a Zen monastery in Korea. And I found myself for the second time in a community, again, this community that was vegan. Again, nobody talked about the fact that it was vegan. It was a silent retreat. Nobody talked about anything. But anyway, it was a vegan community. And they had, but I realized when I was there that they had been practicing what we would call veganism, since the 1200s, right? For 750 years. No meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather, no killing of animals, even mosquitoes. You would never think of it. You would be completely gauche. Like, you wouldn't do that. I mean, the guy sitting next to me in the meditation, he would always brush them over toward me. But he would I wouldn't brush him back toward him, though. But anyway, but the idea, I came back to this culture, and I really, through that experience, I realized that veganism is not some newfangled hippie idea from California. It's an ancient wisdom tradition that goes back thousands of years. It's like I said, it's ahimsa, this idea, this great wisdom that violence always rebounds. It always comes back. If you want to awaken, if you want to be free and happy, if you want to contribute, whatever it is that you feel in your deepest heart that can help bless and inspire you, then that is the purpose, to give the same thing to others. I think if you distilled the whole wisdom tradition of all the world religions into one sentence, it would probably be something like this: whatever you most want for yourself, give that to others. And this basic wisdom, we know that. Whatever, if I want to be loved, then to be loving. If I want to be free, then to help free others. This kind of wisdom, essentially, is eternal and timeless. And what we have to understand is that the animals that we are abusing by the millions every single day don't retaliate. So we think, well, then we can just do it, because they don't sue us, they don't attack us back, they just suffer. So I guess it's okay, we think, I guess. I mean, we don't think about it, but that's the thing. So what we have to understand is that even though the animals themselves do not retaliate, our violence towards the animals always retaliates. Inevitably, it comes back. And we don't see it. It comes back really as violence among people, or as disease, or as psychological illness, or as spiritual illness, or as environmental devastation that's harming all of us. The animals don't retaliate, but our violence comes back, and we have lost the ability to make connections, so we don't see it. We don't make the connection, and so we're on this path, like Einstein said, thus we drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. If we don't wake up and see where we're going, and we won't make those connections, then we'll go extinct without even knowing why we went extinct. It'll just happen. But the beauty, again, is that I feel and I can sense that there is this transformation happening. And it really relies, I think, on all of us making an effort not only to go vegan on the outer level, but to really embody what vegan values are. And those values, I think we know, are respect and kindness and love and mercy and gentleness. And as we embody those at a deeper and deeper level in all of our relationships with both with humans and others, then we'll create, I think, a movement that is far more powerful than a mere political movement. We'll become a living movement of awakening based on a much deeper and higher type of psychological or spiritual or emotional maturity, where we're embodying the change we wish to see in the world. And as this radiates, it's an invisible revolution or evolution, but it is transformational. And it's basically about coming back home, creating local communities based on growing food together, local economies, supporting each other, living in a world of sanity. So as the other system is probably beginning to crumble and so forth, instead of fighting against it, we just build something else. Just keep building, Grow your own. How many of you are growing some of your own food? Some of you? Highly recommend. Even if you're not, you can grow sprouts on the kitchen counter. You can do something. But as we get more involved with growing food, respecting food, supporting each other, and creating plant-based ways of living, veganic agriculture, so we're not using any animal inputs, not using bone meal or blood meal or manure. Really, Madeline goes out into our garden and serves all the plants tea. It's compost tea. But it's really, she has videos about how to make your own tea, and the plants just love it. We've only been in this house, we lived on the road for 17 years in our RV. We just now finally got a house, and we've been there just for 3 years, but we've created a food forest with fruit trees and herbs and vegetables, and it's just wonderful to connect. It's not a big piece of land, but all of us can contribute, I think, in our own unique way, whether it's through writing, through gardening, through teaching, through music, through like Madeline does with art. I just love sitting up here. I feel so honored to have these paintings, these animals. Yeah, I'm speaking in ideas and so forth, but they're speaking with their very beings. If you look into the eyes of these animals, you can see that says 10,000 times what I can say. Looking into the eyes of a cow or a chicken or a turkey or a pig, these animals are beings. How many of you have had a dog or a cat at some point in your life? Somebody, yeah. So when you see into their eyes, there's somebody in there. It's not a thing. There's a being who has interests that are as important to that being as our interests are to us, and that they are capable of suffering. And so how can we cause them suffering for such a trivial reason as taste, or as I don't want to change. I just don't want to change. So here we are. That's the challenge, I think. There's a lot more ideas actually in here that I would love to share with you, but I'm going to kind of wrap it up here and just want to thank all of you for coming. The final message essentially is simply this message of enormously positive potential that we have. That animal agriculture is devastating our planet. It is very bad news, but the good news is it's utterly unnecessary. There's literally millions of vegans who are thriving as proof of that, and as we begin to move in that direction and understand the reason why, then we become a force for healing. And the fellow, I'll just close with this little statement because I think it was kind of interesting. When the World Peace Diet first came out, it was 2005, and Donald Watson, you know who he was? Yeah, Donald Watson was the guy who invented the word vegan. He coined the word vegan in 1944. He was in England. He was a member of the Vegetarian Society of England, but he wanted a word that would account for motivation, and that would include everything. So the official definition of veganism is it's a philosophy and way of life which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So that came out of his vision of a world where we weren't harming animals for any reason. So, and it was not out of necessarily health concerns, but really out of a sense of not wanting to cause abuse to these animals. And of course, since we human beings are also animals, the definition really includes us too. So it's essentially what veganism is: it's yearning to live our lives, not to cause suffering to others. And anyway, so I had a friend who was a journalist who went over to England in 2005 3 times, and then actually twice in 2005, and then in early 2006 he went a 3rd time to interview Donald Watson. And Donald Watson at that point was 95 years old. He was healthy, walking around in the hills, and so this guy was writing these glowing news articles about Donald Watson and his health and his impact and how he invented this word vegan, which is now becoming a whole movement. He called me the 3rd time, and he's from England. He said, "Will, I'm just here again with Donald Watson in England, and I'm with him for the 3rd time, doing an interview. And I just wanted you to know that Donald Watson is now no longer walking in the hills. He's actually telling everyone around him that it's time for him to leave the body. He's had a great life. He's 95, and so he's basically stays at home now. And every afternoon he sits in his bed, and what he does is he sits and he just has his son-in-law read him the World Peace Diet. And he's telling everyone that this is the book that gives the vision of veganism that he had when he coined the word," and something like that. And so I was really touched to hear that this word, which is beginning to, I think, really penetrate the hard shell of our hurting culture with a message of liberation and freedom and health and sustainability. Really, in a sense, the sense I had was that it's not my book, in a sense. It was a book I remember I didn't want to write it. It was like, I came back from Korea, I had done all this meditation. I got a PhD at Berkeley. I'd done all this studies. I could see there was much more to animal agriculture than just it's bad for animals, it's bad for your health, and it's bad for the environment. I could see there's sociological and spiritual and cultural and psychological and all these other dimensions and historical. And I told Madeline, someone's going to write a book about this. It'll be great to read.